Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. My name is Todd Nesloney, your weekly host, and I'm here bringing you people and stories who have inspired or impacted me and that I wanted to share with you, my audience. As you can tell, I'm in a little bit different space today. I'm working late from work, and so I decided to film the episode from my office. But I am thrilled this week to have my special guest, Rebecca Shaddix, on. Rebecca, thanks for being here. Why don't you tell everybody kind of who you are?
Thanks so much for having me, Todd, and happy holidays, everyone. My name is Rebecca, as Todd mentioned, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at GoGuardian, which is actually the fastest growing education company in the US. So it's such a pleasure for me to be able to work with such inspiring people who are really passionate about helping educators create great learning environments and deliver products to schools like yours. Prior to joining GoGuardian, I actually came from a youth internet safety and child welfare research background. I didn't have a traditional marketing background, which is one of the things that I think was fantastic about the differentiation of our founders who really wanted to leverage that sector expertise of coming from working on anti-human trafficking and the commercial sexual exploitation of children and general youth internet safety in collaboration with some of the biggest think tanks in the US. So it's been great to bring that real passion for keeping students safe and helping them unlock their potential over here to GoGuardian.
And I love GoGuardian. I've got to visit y'all's little headquarters over there, and it was so cool. But I want, before we dive into maybe a little bit more about GoGuardian, I want to kind of touch on something you mentioned. You talked a little bit about human trafficking and dealing with that. What led you to have that be something that draws you in to want to fix?
It's a really good question. It's obviously a very tough subject to spend a lot of time in, and I really do admire the people who are in the field day in and day out. I was really raised with a very strong moral compass and strong set of family values that led me to believe that every person had a certain set of rights and deserved a certain amount of respect. And when I found out that some of the most core and foundational rights of people were being violated on such large scale levels, it really was almost a calling to try to intervene and do something about it, because I couldn't believe that in today's day and age, with the technology and the information at our disposal, that people's rights could be violated to that degree, and they could be impacting all of our lives and be in our communities in ways that we don't even see.
What were some of the first steps you took when that just became heavy on your heart?
It's a great question. The first thing I did was I just started to read as much as I could. There's so many amazing survivors who've written books and who will tell their stories. And being in Los Angeles, there was a lot of opportunity to get involved in efforts to help curtail that. Saving Innocence, for example, is headquartered here in Los Angeles. And there's a number of other really incredible organizations nationwide that have footprints everywhere and have partnerships everywhere. And it was really just a draw to start to get involved. Everything as small as a walk to end human trafficking for Polaris, for example. Those are in every community, and there really are ways to support your time and your resources to fighting that. It's something that you're passionate about.
Have you ever gotten to meet anyone who has been a survivor of trafficking?
Absolutely. I did write a paper out of the public policy think tank at UCLA, the Luskin Center, in conjunction with Google. And some of the resources that came from that were being able to meet with survivors. And one of the things that my co-authors and I felt very strongly about was making sure that we really understood as firsthand as possible by joining social workers on their rounds, by going into homes for transitional aged youth who may have been rescued out of trafficking situations, by being able to hear the stories about how people found themselves in those situations, ultimately how they got out, and how it has impacted them since.
So, I've always felt like it's one thing to hear about something that is emotionally impactful for you, but it's another thing to actually experience it. When you got to meet some of these people who have been involved with trafficking, was there any part of it that was more emotionally overwhelming than you expected, or something that you've learned that you didn't know before meeting them?
Absolutely. I think one of the most visceral experiences was learning how young some of these survivors had been when they were first trafficked or when they were first exploited. And that was really hard to fathom, having friends and siblings and babysitting kids who were some of the same ages, 8, 11, 14, and thinking of myself at those ages and how much of a child I really was, seeing these young women who really lost their childhood or never had one to begin with because of the circumstances that ultimately lended to their being able to be exploited at such a wide scale level. It made me feel incredibly fortunate, but also incredibly guilty that I had had such a family-oriented childhood, and so many people here in our own communities don't. So that was very eye-opening to realize that not everyone has had a childhood, and then to try to think of the kinds of adults that would enable them to become or not enable them to become because of interrupted educations or lack of any kind of support or resources. And it really is powerful. And you become very aware of how overlapping many of these issues are. Inequitable education systems, broken family structures, inadequate resources, or awareness of some of the risks that young people face. All of these things lend themselves to people being more at risk and sometimes even putting themselves in positions that they didn't realize were putting them at risk, and finding out that people that they thought were those who cared about them, their boyfriends, for example, or someone who really positioned themselves as the first kind authoritative figure who gave them clothing, who gave them things that made them feel supported like we think parents should. That was the first sense of someone who could ultimately exploit them. And because they didn't have the solid familiar structures that was so pivotal to so many of us, they didn't realize there was anything broken in how they were being treated. Because for some people, some survivors, much of the relationship is the first kindness they've been shown by an authority figure. And that was just really heartbreaking.
Okay, you know, I think that trafficking is something that just happens in other countries. It's also in our country.
That's right. And people that we may see walking down the street and have no idea are actually actively being trafficked. They could be in jeans and t-shirts, and we would have no idea the situation or the story they have. It's also made me vigilant a little more for things that don't feel quite right. A couple of years ago, I was driving down a big street here in Los Angeles, and there was a little boy who didn't have any shoes on, looked very dazed. His arm was clearly injured, and I think prior to my involvement in human trafficking work and really understanding what a risk can look like, I don't know if I would have been as drawn to call the police and take action, because a lot of times we think, oh, I'm imagining things, I'm superimposing things, or I'm projecting something. But really understanding that signs that just something isn't quite right can be a really big call to action to do anything, just to make sure they are.
Right. So if somebody do more to educate themselves or even to help out,
I would advise them to do a lot of research and read a lot, because I'm sure there are opportunities in their community, even as small as a clothing drive, that there's things that they can do and actions they can take every day to have an impact. And whether that's going to resources like Thorn or Polaris or Saving Innocence and learning more about ways to support and get involved, to clothing drives, and even just to raising awareness and sympathy and understanding there, that's a big step.
I love that. So, you know, you're also talking about women in tech and being a voice for that. What did you, obviously you're in a tech field now and you're in a very male-dominated area. So what are some of the struggles you deal with, and why are you trying to just be more of a voice for that?
It's a great question, and I'll actually rewind even a little bit, if you don't mind, Todd.
Yeah.
So I grew up thinking that everyone was equal in every way, and that there was absolutely no difference between any opportunity that anyone would ever have. And it wasn't until I was in college that I realized that there was anything other than just interest that influenced why certain fields were dominated by one gender or by any number of demographic factors than another. And when I became aware that it wasn't just that women were less interested in tech, it really was an exciting and kind of surprising eye-opener that I really didn't think growing up that there was any reason that people would, that there's any kind of bias or prejudice that actually existed. And that naivety really unboxed a lot of what I as an individual thought of myself. And I think it was a really big gift because at the macro level, there's so much we should do, and there's so much room for inclusion and awareness of bias that and subconscious discrimination that all of us walk around with, and every single one of us, through no action or fault of our own, just has. And becoming aware of that at a macro level, and as an adult who's in a position to look at the way I screen resumes, for example, or look at the way I assess competencies and making sure that there is no gendered influence in that is really huge. But as a kid at a micro level, not being bogged down with that awareness and really just thinking the sky's the limit was really a gift that I think my parents gave me, because I didn't spend an ounce of energy thinking that there was any reason I couldn't do anything. And I really, really do appreciate that. And that's the advice I give a lot of my coworkers who feel very passionately about women in tech and who have daughters, is just to be cautious of, even when talking about the cause, what kinds of subconscious effects it can have on their daughters. Because if they spend even a minute wondering if people are looking at them differently because of their gender, it's a minute that they could have spent just thinking that the sky was the limit. But now to fast forward to your original question, it's interesting. I actually, again, I don't know if I would be aware that my field was as male dominated as it was, or if I would notice occasionally when I am the lone woman in the world, had I not been involved in the Women in Tech initiative at the public policy think tank at UCLA. And I was actually recruited into it by a host of fantastic mentors, all of whom happened to be white men who felt passionately about the cause and had technological backgrounds as well. And so I feel very passionately about this being an inclusive movement. And if someone isn't aware of a gender gap, it's not as a result of any shortcoming of their own, just a lack of awareness, as it was for me. And now that I am in a technology field that does happen to often be male dominated, just being able to add some gentle reminders where that could be. If I notice a disconnect in any discourse, and the company I work for is very aware and very supportive and actively trying to recruit women into every rank, and female engineers as well. So it's really been a gift to have that background and understand from a research level really the different factors that influence, and the fact that introducing gently and voluntarily the concept is really the best way to build awareness and gain allies.
I love that. Such a series of different experiences, either growing up or through college. How did that lead you to Go Guardian, where you are now?
It's a great question. So education and opportunities for children has been my North Star. When I was growing up, I really thought that I would get into some kind of poverty alleviation. And then I realized about middle school or high school that the most sustainable actual remedy to systemic poverty is education. And when I realized that, it just became this absolute visceral calling that I've been so passionate about. I studied education, and I was actually on my way to get a teaching credential when the co-founder of Go Guardian reached out about an opportunity here. And it was such an exciting intersection of education and opportunities to impact students at scale that I paused that temporarily. And I think all of those just really painted an opportunity to getting into the tech sector here at Go Guardian, caring about students and education, understanding the risks they face online and the opportunities for exploitation by bad actors, really all lends itself to what we do here, which is trying to build opportune learning environments and keep students safe.
Yeah, for those who don't know about Go Guardian, how would you describe it? I mean, I know you kind of just briefly did just then, but if you were to really describe what the company is and what they stand for, how would you?
It's a great question. Go Guardian is really a company of leveraging technology to unlock student potential and create breakthrough moments. And that started off by ensuring safe learning environments, so educators could trust that their students were engaged in accessing the right information online, and has since expanded into a real ecosystem of understanding how students learn best and identifying learning patterns to deliver the right content to the right students at the right time. And that includes everything really that could impact their learning experience, their mental health and well-being, the ways that they are absorbing the information, giving opportunities to ask questions, especially for struggling learners or students who learn differently, without calling attention to the fact that they don't learn through the chat feature. All different ways for different educators to engage with the student and understand where they are to meet them there.
I love that. What do you see moving forward? What are some of your big goals?
Some of our big goals are really right now around mental health and physical student safety. We have invested in the digital learning environment and optimizing that for a long time, and really hoping to get to this next level of being able to assess and understand learning patterns and where students are with the well-being at the core of it is where our current thinking and our product roadmap is. And we have some fantastic partners with that, lots of industry experts in child psychology and suicide prevention and mental health, and obviously, of course, education policy and delivering the right resources to students.
Now, this may be a little question, but if you weren't working at Go Guardian, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
I went through college fully anticipating that I would become an AP teacher, probably of civics or government or history, at an underserved school in the Los Angeles community. So if I were to leave Go Guardian tomorrow, I imagine my next step would be to get a teaching credential.
That's awesome. Well, Rebecca, I just want to say thank you so much for being one of my guests this week. I know that you're just doing such incredible work, and I love your unique perspective and your passions, and I really just appreciate you sharing some of that really openly tonight, because I think, especially, I mean, with both of the several things we talked about, I think there's not a lot of people that are actually, especially in the education field, talking about trafficking, and there's not always as much conversation about gender representation in different areas either. And so I love that you're passionate about that and that you're talking about it and open about it. So thank you for being like that tonight as well.
And thank you, Todd, for this awesome opportunity and the conversations you're facilitating. Appreciate it.
So if people wanted to learn more about you or about Go Guardian, where would you send them?
Twitter is a great resource for both of us. I'm at Rebecca Shaddix, and we're at Go Guardian. Really happy to connect and direct message as well. Or feel free to email me at becca@becca@goguardian.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening and joining me and Rebecca today on another episode of Tell Your Story, where we hope to inspire you to be brave enough to share your story with others, because every story matters. Have a great evening, and we will see you all soon.